After Effects, we have some basic 3D options. Now, After Effects is not a 3D application like you would expect from Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, Maya. It's actually a 2.5D is what a lot of people call it, and I'll show you why in a second. So if I create a new layer, new, solid, we'll call this box, and we'll make it 640 by 640 and hit OK. Just so we have this very nice big box here. And I'm going to hit S on the keyboard to scale it down just a tad. So now we have a box here. And if I hit P on the keyboard to bring up the position, we can move it along the X axis as such, and we can move it on the Y axis. Very straightforward, and you're just moving this box in 2D space, you know, a flat composition, and we're just moving it on the same plane here. Nothing too complicated. And if I hit R on the keyboard and to bring up the rotation, you can see that we just have a very simple rotation parameter, and we're just rotating our cube 360 degrees. Very straightforward. And this is kind of the 2D flat space that we have in After Effects here. Now, you may have heard me talk about 3D layers within After Effects. Now, to create a 3D layer, you want to select your layer here, and then toggle your switches / modes until you see this little cube icon here, and then under your layer, hit the cube icon for your layer. And as you can see, we have a different parameters available to us now. So let me just hit P on the keyboard. I'm going to uncheck the 3D cube here. And if you hit P on the keyboard to bring up the position, and if you hold down Shift and do another hotkey, R, you'll bring up both positions and keep the previous one here. So you get position and rotation. So this is what I have right now for my cube that is not a 3D layer, it's just a flat 2D layer. Now when I enable the cube, pay attention to the position and the rotation here. You can see that once we convert our layer to a 3D layer, we have an additional position axis here, and this is the Z axis, so this is pretty much controlling the depth of the object in 3D space. And then we also have the orientation in space here, as well as the rotation. So we pretty much have a lot more control over our 3D object within the 3D space within After Effects. But this object here may react like a 3D layer, but it's actually a flat layer reacting into space. Now I know that may not sound very clear, but let me just show you. If I create a new camera here, and we'll talk more about cameras a little bit later in the series here. I'm going to create a camera, and then we're going to rotate around this box here. And you can see that, yes, we have an actual box layer, and we can rotate it, move it in 3D space, as you see here. But as you can see, the actual box is not 3D, it's not extruded, it's just a flat 2D layer, but in a 3D space environment. So that's what 3D means within After Effects. You don't really have 3D extrusions, we can't really, make polygons and such like that, but we do have a 3D space environment in which we can kind of do a lot of tricks, do a lot of trickery and illusions to kind of create a sense of 3D within After Effects. And again, I'll discuss more about that later in the basic techniques section of this course. But just realize that we don't really have full 3D capabilities except for kind of the 3D space environment here. Now, of course, you can create somewhat of a 3D extrusion if you have third-party plugins such as Metal Shapeshifter or Zaxworks 3D Invigorator. There are a lot of plugins that kind of make up and pick up the slack of After Effects, but for the most part, After Effects cannot really behave like a 3D application. Unless you're on CS6 with some basic 3D extrusion, or you're using a 3D application. But then again, if you really want some full control over 3D stuff, like such as polygons, 3D text, 3D objects, then you're going to be doing most of that work in Cinema 4D or 3ds Max. So back to the subject matter, again, we have 2D flat layers in 3D space, and aside from additional position, rotation properties and their reaction to space, you also have material options here. And this is somewhat similar to a 3D application where we can control the material of the object in 3D space. And if I create a new light, you're going to see that it does react to light. So if I create a new light here, we'll call this light, point light, and intensity to 150, we can change the color, and we'll hit cast shadows, hit OK. You can see that our object is affected by our light here, and if I zoom out and kind of adjust the lights, you can see that our 3D layer does react to light. Now, if it's a 2D flat layer, it's not going to react to light at all, and we don't have any material options. But again, 3D objects react to 3D lights, and these lights are automatically 3D. You don't need to hit a switch for them. And you can navigate and kind of reposition, move 3D layers by clicking on these little axis handles here. This is the Y axis, this is the X, and the blue is the Z axis. So you can kind of move it. You can see how it reacts to lights and such like that, and all 3D layers react with each other. So now 3D in After Effects is actually a very, very complicated matter. The concept may seem very simple, it's just a 2D flat layer in 3D space, but you know, once you'll be working with 3D layers and cameras and rotations and all these orientation properties and such, you'll soon realize that 3D layers within After Effects can be kind of complicated, especially with 3D cameras and you know, the interpolation and such like that. So you will run into some weird things when working with 3D layers in After Effects. Hopefully I'll address some of them in this series, but again, it's a very, very complicated manner, and to really understand the concept behind it all and the reaction in 3D space it's probably the most complicated thing within After Effects other than expressions. But this has just been a really basic, quick overview and rundown of how 3D layers react within space and After Effects, and how 3D objects have different transform properties.